Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Thoughtful Leaders, an initiative of the Thoughts and Education by Collegedunia.com. Today we have with us Professor Deepak Ganachari, the Faculty of Operations at IES Management College and Research Center. Welcome to the show, sir. My first question to you is, tell me something about yourself and your role at IES MCRC as a Faculty of Operations.
Thank you very much. As you said, I've been basically in the industry. I started my career in aftermarkets. I started the company called Fiat, where I was in aftermarkets and then channel development. This was almost about 5.5 years. Then I migrated to Ford as a regional manager, and I was in the same lines of marketing, handling sales, service, and aftermarkets. It was then after that I changed my role. I went into a company called Satyam Computers, where I was into consulting, and it was predominantly pre-sales and project management kind of initiatives. I was handling the markets for Middle East and Africa. This was a stint which exposed to me various domains which were more related to operations, which was more related to in terms of process engineering, application deployment. I went on learning as I went ahead with my career and migrated into the world of operations. I thought it was fascinating because change is something which is constant and you could be a part of that change. Migrate companies into becoming more efficient, becoming more niche in their areas of activities, whatever they're doing. And that prompted me across in this domain. Then I changed gears again. I came into education. This was something which I always fancied because something which you have already learned. I had about 22 years of experience with me, and I thought this is the time when I can impart this back to the fraternity. How best I could do it. One of the things that came to my mind is, why don't I start imparting and be a knowledge facilitator in terms of taking this kind of a knowledge and try to transform some young minds in the current eventualities what we are looking at. And that made me move into operations as a specialization, and I started teaching. I've been teaching for MBA students for almost a decade, and with IES MCRC I've been there for 7 years. My specific areas are logistics, supply chain management, project management, and all subjects related to operations, operational excellence. This is what I've been doing here.
So my next question to you is, as the Faculty of Operations at IES MCRC, how do you envisage the current scenario in this domain?
Well, we are today looking at uncertainties with the current pandemic kind of a situation. We are reeling under so many events which are happening for the first time, activities which we have never done. We thought everything was available. Companies thought that they were working in some kind of a harmony. We have seen that what such kind of global pandemic brings about in terms of challenges for organizations to transform themselves, whether it is in terms of becoming leaner, whether it is to work on remote locations or work from home kind of a scenario, and how do we migrate this kind of a knowledge and build managers to becoming more self-reliant. If I were to just look back in terms of what our Honorable Prime Minister spoke about in terms of Atmanirbhar, two things which I would like to focus amongst the 5 pillars. He mentioned supply chain initiatives and at the same time analytics and data science. I think these are two key areas where one can look at if any country has to grow, and in a global platform, look at in terms of uncertainties and challenges. We need to focus in terms of how our supply chains are, how robust they are, how resilient they are, and at the same time, how nimble they are to adapt to changing environments and situations. At the same time, leverage on technology in terms of whatever skill sets and whatever areas which are newly advancing in terms of the technology domain, and how we can dovetail these kind of initiatives to become self-reliant as well as in terms of truly global managers and bring about change in the society as well as for ourselves.
Okay. So my next question to you is, How do you differentiate your institute in imparting knowledge to your students?
Well, at IES MCRC, we have multiple ways the way we do impart knowledge. We do have our regular classroom sessions, but more and more the focus is to do something out of the box. We have cut away from the traditional set of courses what we would have for a program, and we have something like self-learning courses, which are more where students opt for certain programs or courses which they feel that could be useful for their own domain and in their area of choices. At the same time, we do use a lot of case study learning where students are able to understand situations, analyze the situations, and come up with alternatives which can basically help them in looking at trying to be resilient in terms of how opportunities are, at the same time how to work with the threats and how to migrate across from these kind of situations and bring about changes. So we try to imbibe all these kind of traits. Apart from this, we have a strong mentoring system where we counsel students in terms of the area of interest. This is not only related to or limited to education per se, but in their own personal development, addressing their fears, trying to overcome their difficulties, whether it could be for basically presenting themselves, learning more of a domain, or trying to choose in terms of where their career they want to hone across and those kind of areas. I think we are looking at education more holistically at IES MCRC, which can bring about transformation and make them able managers and sustainable managers rather than just acquire them with a degree and say that you are an MBA. So that has been one of the strong focus what IES MCRC looks for.
So my next question to you is, what do you think about the future job opportunities for budding MBA aspiring students?
Well, if I were to talk of operations, as I said, with the Atmanirbhar and Make in India kind of initiatives, if I were to just talk about India itself, we are looking at in terms of proliferating into rural markets. We are looking at in terms of smart city campaigns where we are looking at moving across E-class cities into higher number of cities actually. And thereby we are trying to reach out to the common man in the rural villages. And I think this is where our supply chain across the country, or whether it is global proliferation, we need to be more nimble. And one of the greatest things which I always say, if we look today's scenario, or it has been the case, everything is rising in terms of costs are rising, salaries are rising, your cost of raw materials are rising. At the same time, your prices are very competitive in the market to be sustainable. And then what it squeezes out as a bottom line, operational excellence. So that is where I think more and more companies will start trying to not cut corners, but make themselves more operational excellent, thereby trying to gather more value. So in that context, I think there are tremendous opportunities going forward where companies are now looking at modern technologies, at the same time looking at in terms of building proper processes, implementations of systems, and at the same time trying to deliver value and trying to be very nimble in the way they look at their product life cycles as well as in terms of delivery to customers. So I think all in all, there is a great deal of emphasis on operational excellence, and with the current situation what we see, companies will be driven to the wall trying to be sustainable, and that is where these MBAs grads will definitely make a difference, and I see a great potential for them in terms of honing out a great career for themselves.
My next question to you is, how do you tend to establish a healthy relation and environment in your institute with the students and your faculty and your colleagues?
Well, in terms of, I don't know how do I answer this to create a healthy environment, because it is a healthy environment. We are very transparent in our activities, and this has been one of the key reasons where I have been able to sustain myself also, where I see that we are very well-defined processes which are in place. At the same time, adherence to processes is one of our hallmarks. And all these processes are not driven by a single hierarchical kind of a diktat, but it is more in terms of uniform discussions. It goes through in terms of unbiased opinions, taking everybody on board before processes are streamlined and activated. So I think all in all, there is a great deal of transparency. At the same time, the students are not put in silos in terms of their specialization or their specific faculty. Though while I mentioned some time back about mentoring, this is where students have a specific mentor, but it does not stop them to interact with any faculty. And we nourish and nurture this kind of trait within the organization to ensure that the students are felt like a family and the entire faculty and the management looks together as a family in terms of molding and building the career. So, whereas internally when we look at our own faculties, I find that there is a great deal of comfort in terms of interactions. With the top management, there is definitely a very good relation in terms of we are very open in terms of discussions, and that is what I think makes a great environment for a healthy relationship, and at the same time building a very positive environment across.
Okay, sir. So my last question to you is, any suggestions you would like to give to the current youth and aspiring students?
Well, today's youth are way too different in terms of their thought processes. In terms of they don't like the stereotype kind of environment which they have been seeing. They like to break rules, which I think is good, and they are aggressive. One of the things before I would give advice, that is where I would like to say positive things first. They are very adaptable. This is something पहले लगता था कि ये नहीं कर पाएगा, वो नहीं कर पाएगा. Look at the way the younger generation are able to adapt technology. Look at the way they are able to, in terms of look at specializations or in terms of domains to work with. The adaptation is great. The communication is great. And I think that is something which are very positive of the current generation, what I'm seeing across. Some of the key messages, what I would like to personally give is, we need to adapt ourselves in terms of having more understanding of knowledge, trying to read. This is something which I see is lacking, whether it is visual or whether it is in terms of books. There is a little resistance in terms of the current youth in terms of trying to imbibe that kind of knowledge within themselves, and try to pace out your thinking. Try to bring about less aggression and try to put more thought and bring about logical conclusions. And you don't need to be worried, because one of the things we see that students or the younger generation get more distracted. Yes, the environment is such that we have so many things to get ourselves distracted today, but try to build on a focus. Try to look at in terms of how you can look at and make a career out of yourself. Constant learning is one of the key messages I would like to give. And one thing for sure, as I'm here today doing, imparting knowledge, I came from the industry, and that is where I would look at, in terms of students, try to change gears, be ready to change gears, look at the environment and be ready to adapt in terms of what are the new challenges and the new job opportunities. I'm sure you guys are great learners, and that is what I would like to, bring about to your attention, to be ready to change gears anytime and adapt yourselves. That would be my message to the students, basically.
So thank you very much, sir. This was certainly an insightful session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.